This is John Cole with OKRaw.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you. And in this episode, I'm going to share with you guys actually why I eat cooked foods, or I like to call them heat processed foods, to supplement my raw foods diet, right? Hopefully many of you guys on a raw diet or even a vegan diet are already supplementing your diet with things like supplements, like vitamin B12. I think every person on the planet should probably take a vitamin B12, and then also something like maybe a vitamin D as well. Right now I'm not supplementing with vitamin D because my vitamin D supplementation is conditional if I could get enough sun. Of course, my vitamin B12 I take on a more regular basis. That being said, this is something that you might want to look into if you are into 100% or almost all raw foods diet. For many years, I started raw foods in 1995, so 26 years now, I've been eating like a 99% raw foods diet. Yeah, in the early years, I ate some heat processed foods when I had a, breakup or something like that. But for the most part, I pretty much stick with solid raw foods for all these years. And just recently, maybe several years ago, I made a video, 12 foods I eat that aren't raw, link down below to that, because there are actually some raw foods that are labeled as raw that aren't really raw. But then even at that point, I started introducing some heat processed foods that I would not necessarily heat myself, including mushroom powders and, artichokes that were blanched, and even some frozen vegetables that were blanched before freezing, which I still include actually to this day in very small amounts. But nowadays I've actually increased the kinds of heat processed foods that I consume, and that's primarily for 3 reasons. There's a lot of other reasons as well, but that's what I hope to share with you guys in this episode. My reasoning for including some heat processed foods, once again, as a supplement to my raw foods diet. I believe that if you do raw foods diet properly, you could probably eat all raw if you wanted to. But I would also encourage you guys to assess your goals and your needs and ensure that, everything's working properly for you if you do want to do that. Make sure you get regular blood tests and check your health. And, I do all these different kinds of tests to make sure all my blood markers and all this stuff is, healthy and in range. And for the most part, they have been. The one test I haven't done yet, which I will be doing, is microbiome testing, and that's actually one of the main reasons why I'm including some heat processed foods in my diet along with the health benefits. While I am including some heat processed foods, it's not like I go out to McDonald's and I've gone off the wagon. I am still eating 100% plant-based. I strongly am committed to, not harming other creatures on the planet. That's very important to me. I try to leave the lightest footprint as I can. The eggplants I grew myself, literally I just harvest them. These potatoes are from a local farm that I eat. And try to get my mushrooms and even artichokes that I eat, from the next state over. So eating locally is still very important, and also, of course, eating the highest quality foods you could find or you can grow yourself. So those things have not changed. Another thing I don't do, just because I'm eating heat processed foods, doesn't mean I'm just going to go out to the vegan restaurant in town, and there's many, and it's unfortunate that most vegan restaurants, actually almost all vegan restaurants I ran into, they just serve junk, crap, processed foods, right? And that's just the truth of the matter, right? And I think far too many people that are on a vegan diet eat far too much processed foods. And, I believe that people should aspire to a whole foods, plant-based diet that is nutrient dense. I'll talk about that in a minute. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I'm including some heat processed food. So yeah, I don't go out to vegan cook places. I don't go to Whole Foods and buy pre-prepared cooked garbage to eat. I don't do any of that stuff, right? This is how I supplement my raw diet. My diet is still predominantly raw. I still eat plenty of large salads and fresh raw soups that are not heat processed. I drink lots of juices, and of course, I am loving the summer fruit. Right now I have things like apricots and peaches and nectarines and cherries and strawberries. Had some mulberries off my tree. Have cantaloupes and honeydews and watermelons and jackfruits and mangoes. black grapes. I have so many fruits I can't even eat them all, and I still get the overwhelming majority of my calories from raw foods. And to remind everybody, you know, John, you're no longer raw anymore. You guys could think whatever you guys want, but there's no legal definition of what is a raw foodist, but in general, a raw foodist is one who consumes more than 75% of their calories in a raw food form. You know, at that definition, I easily make it. I'm still probably hovering around 90, or right around 90%, you know. And it depends on the day. Some days I'm 100% raw because I don't include any of the things I'll be showing you guys today. And some days I will. And it just varies on how I feel, you know, and what I feel like, you know, doing if I have, you know, raw food, salads, and juices prepared, which I normally always have. Now, the other thing I don't do is I don't make these elaborate cook food dishes like, you know, whatever, lentil curry and all these different baba ganoushs, and I don't even know how to do all that stuff. I don't even care about that stuff either. I'm not doing any of those things. I'm not adding salt to the foods when I eat them. I'm not adding spices. All the foods you guys see here are eaten in two ways. Number one, I will use some of the heat processed foods in my raw food dishes. So for example, you know, generally with mushrooms, I will heat process them, chop them up, and then put them in the fridge to let them cool down. And then I will add the cold mushrooms that have been heat processed to my raw salad or my raw soup. I'll do the same thing with the beans, right? And also with the rice as well. You know, although this rice I do heat process, Jasper rice, I also eat still bloomed wild rice as well, which actually I prefer over this. But I want to give you guys full disclosure and be transparent and share with you guys what I'm doing. I'm not trying to sit here and hide stuff, but I have very specific reasons for why I do the things I do. And, you know, and I want to just tell you guys like it is, because maybe for some of you guys, you might want to dabble in this. Maybe some of you guys don't. Maybe some of you guys think I'm crazy for including some heat processed foods after eating basically 99% raw foods for the last 25, 26 years now. And you guys could think whatever you want. I'm on my own journey, my own path. And to remind you guys, you know, I got into raw foods in 1995 because I almost lost my life. And at the time, I learned a lot about raw food. Some of the things I learned was quite dogmatic. And the primary thing that I learned that kept me raw for all these years is the one statement, which I know now to be false, which is, when you eat cooked foods, it causes leukocytosis, which is basically an increase in your white blood cell count. And that is like an immune response, right? And I had a complement immune deficiency, so the one thing I did not want to do is always activate my immune system from the foods I was eating. Since that time, and I learned that dogma, which I now know not to be true, I learned the truth of the matter. And the truth of the matter is not all heat processed foods causes leukocytosis, or the white blood cell increase. And I know this because I have personal friends that have done the testing where they will go to the, you know, get blood tests and eat raw foods and get a blood test and, you know, no white blood cell increase. Then they went to the health food store and got the junkiest, crappiest vegan cookie, processed vegan crap you could get, ate that, and then got their blood tested. No leukocytosis, no white blood cell increase. Then they had another friend eat some animal products, and then they checked for leukocytosis, and guess what? They had leukocytosis. So, from what I believe now, leukocytosis is only caused by any kind of animal foods, not even the crappiest cooked plant foods. That doesn't mean you have a free pass to eat cooked vegan cookies that are crappy from the health food store, because John said it doesn't cause leukocytosis. There are a lot of other issues with crap vegan cookies. The main issue I have with crap vegan cookies is that you are displacing a lot of calories that you could have eaten from otherwise healthier foods, and literally that's what you're going to learn about today. So I'm not going to necessarily say that, you know, these foods are healthier than the raw foods that I eat, but I will say that I believe these foods are a definite benefit to my diet, to supplement my diet when I see and feel fit to do so. So my primary reason for going raw to prevent the leukocytosis from occurring, which is like the boy who cried wolf, I learned wasn't valid. And I probably learned that about, I don't know, 10 years or 15 years ago now. But I've still maintained a raw foods diet until I've learned about more recent studies and research. As new information comes out, I will adjust and change my diet. And some of the new research that's come out has prompted me to now include some heat processed foods in my raw foods diet. And while I was about 100% raw in the beginning, right in the early years, I later changed my definition to 100% health, because I do a raw foods diet for my health for no other reason. I mean, I'm glad I don't have to eat animals, to eat a plant-based diet. Nonetheless, and I'm glad I don't need to hurt other creatures on the planet. I'm glad I could grow some of the food I eat myself and leave a lighter footprint on the planet. And it's much better for the environment and all these things as well, and sustainability. But my primary reason was health, and my goal is 100% health, not 100% raw, which I believe can be dogmatic. Now, another thing that I just wanted to mention real quick is that, some of the longest lived blue zone areas around the world eat not necessarily even a vegan diet or a raw diet, right? They eat, the one thing they have all in common, actually, although they may eat some small amounts of animal products, they eat a nutrient-dense diet. And that is my main takeaway if you guys don't take away anything else, right? I want to have the highest level of health and longevity at this point. And honestly, a vegan diet or even a raw vegan diet is an experimental diet. There's been no cultures in history that have done these diets for any long linked periods of time. In history, as humans, we would eat whatever we could get our hands on. In most cases, it would be a lot of plant materials. In some cases, some animals mixed in, and depending on where the humans lived in the world or whatever, maybe they'd eat more animal products. But the one thing is clear to me is that the more nutrient-dense plant foods you eat, the longer you're going to live, and that is a very important factor to me. And along with how long you're going to live is the health benefits that come along with that, to be able to have a nice long health span versus just a lifespan, to be healthy and to be able to play with your grandkids and kids even as you get more mature and travel around the sun more times. Now, the next thing I want to say is that while I am eating some heat processed foods, I don't just start up the barbecue or light a fire and get a big tea kettle or pot and start boiling the crap out of stuff or charbroiling it. I don't deep fry anything. I don't even microwave anything. There's only one way I heat process my food at this time, and it's likely not to change anytime soon, and that is with a pressure cooker. I use the Instant Pot pressure cooker. And according to some of the science that I've seen, pressure cooking is probably one of the best, in most cases, not all cases, ways to heat process your food to retain the highest level of antioxidants and bioactive compounds. In general, the best way to heat process foods are two things. Number one, lowest temperature as possible. Also coupled with that, number two, shortest amount of time. And you want to do that not while the foods are submerged underwater, because nutrients can leach out into the water. And that's why I like the pressure cooker. How I use this is I basically, inside here there's like a metal little bowl thing that you fill up, and I fill with water, like maybe 1 cup of water in the bottom. I have this little standoff in the bottom that sits on the bottom, so like this little tray is not sitting in water, it's right above it. So this is basically like my version of a steaming little colander thing that folds. I don't like those things, they're hard to clean. But this works well. And then I basically put whatever foods I want on top of this so that it basically steams. Now that's how I cook all the vegetables. When I cook some of the beans and the rice, then I will submerge it in liquid. And sometimes the liquid I use is actually things like tomato juice, which is kind of cool. So now I'm adding extra lycopene from my tomato juice that's being infused into the rice, for example. And when you heat up lycopene, it's shown in studies that it converts into a different kind of lycopene that you may get better absorption from. So I could gain those benefits that I normally couldn't gain on a raw foods diet. That being said, my goal is to eat heat processed tomatoes, but when I cook my rice, I need a liquid, so might as well use tomato juice if I have extra tomato juice left over when I process tomatoes. Now, the other thing I want to say to you guys right now is that this is my goal, right? My goal is if I could eat the food raw, I'm still going to eat it raw. Like, I see no use, well, I see very little purpose in actually heat processing kale or collard greens or other leafy greens that are perfectly edible raw, especially when I pick them from my garden and they're young and tender, and or I pick the larger leaves and I juice them. I would much rather drink a fresh made vegetable juice and remove some but not all the fiber than heat process my kale and keep all the fiber when you do it under pressure cooking and steaming, but you lose anti-cancer benefits if you don't pre-cut your kale first, and you're losing more antioxidants than keeping it raw. So, with every food processing technique, I want you guys to understand that you will lose something. I've been talking about this in some of my past videos, and I hope to make another master video how that shows like every different method of food processing, you lose something, including, things like juicing. You lose some of the fiber that you could see, but you can't see the loss of the antioxidant compounds or things like anthocyanins or things breaking down. So my goal is still, if I could eat it raw, I eat it raw. And a matter of fact, these foods, purple sweet potatoes, Stokes purple sweet potatoes, you can eat raw, and I do grow them in my garden. These ones I happen to buy because my garden didn't come in yet. But you could also eat the greens, just like spinach, raw. But these guys I will heat process, but I will also eat them raw. And we'll get into why I do that in a little bit. But generally my goal, if I could eat something raw, I'm still going to eat it raw. I'm not putting watermelon or any kind of fruits in here to cook and eat. I'm only going to heat process things I must heat process to make them palatable or edible, to remove some of the toxins. So that's my goal. But and then I use the pressure cooker. This thing is super simple, super easy to use. The main thing I do is I just put manual and adjust the time to how long I need to do it. I just harvested these eggplants from my garden, and I'll probably put these in for I'll do manual and bump it down to 3 minutes and then let it go to town. Something like the potatoes might take 5 minutes. Like a large artichoke like this might take 25 minutes. These small sweet potatoes might take 15 minutes. Larger ones might take longer. The mushrooms maybe take, might do 5 to 10 minutes, depending. The corn, the purple corn, that takes a long time. I don't know. That could be like an hour. The rice, maybe like 20 minutes, and the beans, maybe like 20 minutes. Depends if you pre-soak them or not. Sometimes maybe even less. So that's the basics of me supplementing my raw diet with some heat processed foods. Sometimes, I don't do this all the time, once again, much like you might take a supplement like vitamin D right now in the summertime. Like, I have no use for vitamin D. The best vitamin D that I could get is basically my body making it from the sun. I'm usually out in the garden in shorts on like every single day, getting some nice sun and with my hat on so I don't get too much sun in my face. So likewise, with some of this heat processed food, I want to get these into me sometimes, but not all the time. I also believe in diet rotation. I don't want you guys to eat the same food day in and day out. Every night I have purple sweet potatoes. Every night I have this. I always want you guys to mix it up, and that's what I do personally in my life. I always mix it up and always will eat different things, alternate days, or every third day I might have this or might have that or something like that. So now I want to get into the 3 reasons on why I'm supplementing my raw food diet with heat processed foods. So number 1 is because I'm now heat processing foods, I'm able to increase my diversity of foods I'm eating. Generally, these foods cannot be consumed raw, generally. I mean, you could dehydrate your eggplants and eat them, but if you did dehydrate them, according to a study I saw, you lose 80 to 100% of the antioxidant compounds in the eggplants. Antioxidants are quite important to me. But if you pressure cook them, you actually gain antioxidants, which is amazing. Potatoes aren't generally consumed raw, and I don't eat regular standard potatoes generally. I only eat the purple potatoes. These are not as sweet, and they're really rich and vibrant in color. You can eat purple sweet potatoes raw, or any sweet potatoes raw that are true sweet potatoes, but there's also benefits to eating them when they have been heat processed. According to the science, they have a different microbiome impact, whether they have been heat processed and cooled and reheated, or eaten raw, or just heat processed. And actually the best way to eat it for the best microbiome benefit is actually heat processing them, cooling them down, putting them in the fridge, and then reheating them again. So generally I will do two of those steps. I'll heat the sweet potatoes, I'll put them in the fridge, I'll let them cool down, and then I'll eat them. So hopefully I'm getting more benefit than just heat processing them. Because here's the thing, that the starches will convert into different forms as far as I believe, and we have different microbes that like different forms of different starches. When we break them down more for our microbes, they may be happier or not as happy, and you may be selecting for different microbes. So it's a whole different level and playing field to think. I think a lot of raw food is still maybe doing a lot of mono meals, which is probably on some levels good for your digestion because it gives your digestion a break, and also maybe increases a lot of certain microbes in your microbiome because they like to digest the certain foods. But on the same time, please know that you're selecting for certain microbes, and you are going to be getting rid of some that are not necessary to digest your, say, bananas, if you have a very small focused diet. So I would encourage you guys to do diet diversity. So being able to increase my diet, and especially eat more vegetables and foods that'll give me some caloric benefit aside from eating as much fruit. So my videos were like how I eat a vegetable based raw foods diet, which is quite odd and quite extreme. And to do that on a raw foods diet, you do need, I do juice a lot of vegetables to basically get my caloric needs without eating as much fruit. That being said, because it is summer now, I've increased my fruit consumption and decreased my vegetable consumption because now there's so many just amazing summer fruits to eat. But that being said, my goal with the heat processed foods is not to increase my calories. Actually, my goal with the heat processed foods is to keep my calories of percentage of heat processed foods very low, and just eat the best of the best heat processed foods to benefit me more. The second reason for supplementing my diet with some heat processed foods is to have a better range and sources and kinds of different fiber. There are scientific journal published studies that show the wider diversity of foods, of plant foods that you eat, the greater your microbiome diversity will be. It is recommended that you eat at minimum 30 different fruits and vegetables and other plant foods in a week. I far exceed that, just even on a raw diet with all the different raw foods I eat. But now I could even inch that up by including foods that I would not necessarily eat raw. And this is very important. I mean, this is new and emerging research, and I wish I knew this information when I got started on raw foods in 1995. I mean, they weren't barely ever doing any kind of microbiome research at that point. They didn't even probably have the super technology that they have today, where we can sequence all the genes and of the bacteria of your poop and all these things. So we'll be getting a microbiome test actually for me and my dog, to make sure he has a healthy microbiome as well, because the microbiome is an essential part of our immune system and for us and our health. From the emerging research. So adding some heat processed foods allows me to get more fiber to keep my microbes happier. And probably one of the best fibers, if you guys are only going to include one of these things in terms of fiber anyways, purple sweet potatoes is probably one of the best foods for the fiber. If you've never had purple sweet potatoes, these are purple on the inside, deep purple on the inside. And I'll tell you guys the tip that a lot of people don't know: as much as our microbes like fiber, they also like things like polyphenols and especially anthocyanins. Some of these microbes will eat the different fibers and polyphenols and probably other properties in the foods and actually make metabolites, secondary metabolites like fats and whatnot that are really good for us and other different nutrients. And so that's another angle that I really never worked on a raw foods diet. It inherently happened on a raw foods diet. But now, knowing what I know and seeing some of the data, I could now improve this a little better. Now, the third reason why I started supplementing my raw foods diet with some heat processed foods is probably one of the most important for me. It's so that I could eat a more nutrient dense diet, right? What is nutrient density? Well, to me, that term was coined by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. He has a nutritarian diet, which is the diet style I would recommend if you just want to eat a plant-based diet. It's probably the best diet style out there in my opinion, because it's focused around a nutrient dense diet. And he recommends some of the foods to eat that I'm sharing with you guys today, although I even eat a few more that he does not recommend because I believe them to be quite healthy. He has his G bombs that he recommends eating. And being a raw foodist, it's hard to eat all the G bombs when you're basically omitting things like mushrooms because they should be heat processed, and things like beans. So that's one of the reasons why I started heat processing some of these foods to increase my nutrient density. To me, bananas are a whole food, which is great, but they're very high calorie and low nutrient density because they have a lot of calories, and yeah, they have some fiber and some nutrients in there. I did a video, link down below, where I compared carrot juice, raw carrot juice, to raw bananas, and the carrot juice blows away the bananas in terms of nutrient density or nutrients per calorie. So my goal is to eat the least amount of calories but get the most amount of nutrients, including vitamins and minerals, more importantly things like phytonutrients. These are quite important to me, as you guys can see, and as I go over some of these foods, one thing will just really pop out to you in your face as I go over all these foods. But anyways, each of these foods has a certain property that I desire to have in my life that I could not get from eating raw foods, and that's why I'm including them in my diet, and I'll go over them one at a time. So for example, eggplants. Eggplants contain solanine. It's in the Solanaceae family, and solanine could be toxic, and all this stuff. Also has alkaloids in there. I think solanine is an alkaloid. But these things are also shown to be anti-cancer. So there's some potentially anti-cancer benefits in eggplants. Plus, to me, more importantly than the anti-cancer benefit is the unique fiber in the eggplants. But more importantly, the anthocyanins. Some of the studies that I've came across suggest that the vegetable anthocyanins are better absorbed than fruit anthocyanins. So even if you're eating wild, blueberries from Canada, pesticide-free like I do, they may not be as well absorbed as the vegetable anthocyanins because they have a little bit different shape or molecule structure or however that stuff goes, right? So yeah, I eat this primarily for the purple anthocyanin compounds plus the fiber plus, these are very low calorie, believe it or not. And I could grow them myself. And I just love to eat them plain. These are going to be pressure cooked right after this video, probably for like 4 minutes. But yeah, so the anthocyanin content and the fiber in the eggplants, and it allows me to get greater diversity. Next up are artichokes. As a child growing up in California, we would eat boiled artichokes as a child, and we would dip them in mayonnaise. And I love that as a child. It's like brings back childhood pleasant memories. When I first, I would eat the first frozen artichoke hearts, and I'm like, why am I buying frozen artichoke hearts? They're not that good. And then I would buy artichoke hearts in a jar without the additives, which are hard to find. But then I'm only eating the hearts, and there's a lot of parts to the artichoke that are actually quite health beneficial that I was not eating. So then I decided just to heat process them myself, so now I could get more benefits than just the hearts alone that I previously was adding to things like raw soups and raw salads. Now why I add the artichokes is because even if the artichoke is heat processed, even if it's in a can, the artichoke hearts, they are still one of the highest vegetables in antioxidant compounds, which is actually insane to me. Plus, as I grew up with them, I love the taste of artichokes. And when I first made them, I made like a avocado like nut dip to simulate the mayonnaise, and it just was very dense. And I was like, then I was too lazy to make it the next time, and I just ate it plain. I'm like, wow, these are good plain. I don't even need a dip. Why am I even making a dip, wasting my time? Just eat them plain. Also lower calorie, and also to remind you guys, these are in the thistle family. Artichokes are a thistle, and they got these little thistle points on them that'll get you. But because they are in the thistle family, related to milk thistle, they are also, really rich in prebiotics that feature probiotics, and also good for liver detoxification, in my personal opinion. I'd take a break and get my carrot juice. This is like purple carrot juice with orange carrots and beets. Mm. Yeah, as you can see, I don't heat process my carrots. No need. Way better to juice them, in my opinion. All right, so that's with artichokes. Now the next food I eat are the purple potatoes. These are like baby purple potatoes. I don't like to get the big purple potatoes because the big purple potatoes have higher levels of starch. To me, the main benefit to purple potatoes are, once again, the purple insides, the anthocyanins, as well as the starch in here that could be good for my microbiome. That's the reason for the purple potatoes. The purple sweet potatoes, pretty much the same reasoning. Although I do juice these sweet potatoes actually into my juice as well, because they can be consumed raw. But I also will heat process them to change the fiber up, and also, get them that way as well. And Oakley, my dog, he loves the purple sweet potatoes once they're cooked. And then next, I eat the mushrooms. Dr. Joel Fuhrman recommends mushrooms, as one of the foods you should eat. They're anti-cancer, angiogenesis inhibitors, which is really good. And in addition, they provide different types of fiber. It has a chitin fiber that should be heat processed to be broken down, as well as there could be some toxins in the mushrooms. I know some of you guys will eat mushrooms raw. I personally do not do that, and nor do I advocate you guys doing that. I think, you gain a lot more by heat processing them than by eating them raw, in my opinion. If you want to heat process them, like I'm going to cook actually a whole batch of mushrooms in the pressure cooker, like plain. I'll cook them plain on high for maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, and then I take them out and I just put them in a mason jar in the fridge and just let them cool down, and then I have them ready in the fridge for next time I make a salad. I can just take them out and dump them in my salad or dump them in my soup, so I could get the benefits of the mushrooms. Plus they add a nice flavor or a texture to my foods. I'll get different kinds of mushrooms. Normally I buy shiitakes, which I favor, but this time I got just standard buttons and baby bellas. So yeah, that's why I eat the mushrooms in my diet, and they're probably the lowest calorie of all these things that you guys are seeing today. Next up, we got the beans. Dr. Joel Fuhrman also talks about the benefits of the beans, and the beans are very important to include. And as a raw foodist, I would include a limited amount of beans. I would include some peas that are frozen. Those are a kind of bean, although those have been blanched. They're organic at Costco, are the ones I get, or at Trader Joe's. I also grow every year in my garden sugar snap peas, which are also a kind of bean. I eat carob, which is a kind of bean. And there's other kinds of beans that I would eat in a raw foods diet. But now you could also sprout lentils, of course, and sprout certain kinds of beans, although certain kinds of beans are quite toxic even if sprouted. So you should be heat processing them. But the beans I choose to eat are these guys right here. This is actually called the Urad Black Hole or Black Gram. These are organic from the local Indian market in town. They can be hard to find organic. But the black gram is basically like a black lentil, and I've seen the studies on it, and the studies show that the black gram is like the bean that has the highest level of omega-3s than any other bean. And to remind you guys, you want to really make sure your omega-3 to 6 balance is proper. And I believe the black gram could help me do that. In addition, the black gram is also black, so it also has those anthocyanins I like. While this is my dominant bean that I like to eat, I also have other kinds of beans, including black turtle beans, black soybeans I haven't actually cooked up yet, and other kinds of beans that I also like to include. I got some brown chickpeas that not as sweet as the standard chickpeas. I tend to like foods that are more colorful and pigmented, and actually not quite as sweet, because if I want sugar, I'm going to get that from my fruits, and these foods I'm eating more for their nutritive properties. Now the next food that I will eat on rare occasion, I don't do this one too much, is the jasperi rice. This is actually the deepest, most purplish, anthocyanin-rich rice probably on the planet. It's traditionally grown and organic. Met the company that actually is marketing this, and they're an amazing company. But yeah, this is and I don't like to eat rice too much because it just I don't really like the flavor. Actually, it tastes really plain and just I'd rather eat a sweet potato. But I like this because it's purple, and they gave me some for free, so I'm just eating it. But I'm not going to probably buy any more. That being said, I prefer to bloom the wild rice in the sun but the wild rice is technically pork, so technically that's not raw either. And I think the final thing that I'm going to share with you guys today that I heat process irregularly is the black corn. So this is actually, or black or purple corn is probably the most anthocyanin-rich food on the entire planet, that has the highest level of anthocyanins in it. And actually, this is not a sweet corn, this is a dent corn, so this is the kind of corn they would actually make like tortilla shells out of. I don't do that. So I basically heat process to make it edible, because it is a starchy, a corn that you do need to heat process before eating. You can't just soak it and eat it raw. That's not going to work. So I do heat process so I could get them into me, and once again, these are anthocyanin rich. If you guys notice, most of the foods that I heat process are purple foods, and that is so I can increase the amount of purple that I get in my life. I see more and more research on how the purple anthocyanins are some of the most complex properties in foods, and how they can be some of the most health beneficial properties. And on a raw foods diet, it can be challenging to get a lot of them into you, especially if they're in the fruits that may not be as well absorbed. Of course, a lot of the berries are purple and whatnot, and if you really go out of your way to find purple carrots, you could get, the purple sweet potatoes that are purple. If you grow your own, foods, you could grow red vegetables and purple vegetables, which I tend to grow, like purple sugar snap peas I grow every year. If you're interested in finding out about the power of purple, check the link down below. I made a video on my gardening channel about the power of purple and the power of anthocyanins. There's a lot of research on how anthocyanins can help, regulate your body and help heal. And this is in animal studies that I'm not in favor of, but I'm glad to see that it has a benefit. And I believe, if done with humans, and there probably are some studies done with humans, they will show significant benefit as well. That being said, my whole diet isn't a purple diet. I eat many different colors of foods, and I just strive to get more purple in me than the next guy or girl on the planet, because I believe that to be healthful. And I'm glad I could do this in this day and age. And once again, my diet is an experiment. I'm experimenting on myself, and I want to encourage you guys to experiment on you, based on some of the science. If you guys want to read the science like I do, or also based on some of the peoples in the world that have the longest lives, like, research some of the blue zone diets, you'll find that all eat antioxidant rich foods. And some of these foods, like purple potatoes, are from like the Andes, and the purple corn, success leaves clues, guys. So like, I'm trying to follow the clues and tailor my diet, not by some dogma of raw foods, but by getting the greatest level of health by including foods that I would not normally eat on a raw foods diet. So that's why I'm supplementing my raw foods diet with some heat processed foods these days. Once again, some days I have, maybe an artichoke or two and some sweet potatoes. A lot of days I might have mushrooms in my salad or soup with some maybe rice or beans. And some days I won't have any of that stuff. I'll just have a raw salad, and I'll have all raw days with fruits and my juices and salads and raw soups that I like to make. So it just kind of depends, but I wanted to throw this out there because, I'm like the different raw foodist, that like I really get into this stuff deep. I share things on my YouTube channel that really you're not going to hear on traditional raw food channels, because I maybe think a bit differently, and I've been doing this a lot longer than most people making raw food videos on YouTube. Once again, this is my 26th year of eating raw foods, and I got into this strictly for my health. Not for weight loss, not so that I could run ultra marathons, which I think is really cool, but just to, gain a greater level of health, build up my immune system so that it's quite strong, and live happily, and also, more importantly, share with you guys what I'm doing. In case you guys want to follow me or emulate this, or believe some of this information may be helpful to you, and I would encourage you guys to try it, if you're whatever you're doing, if it's working for you, don't change. But if you want to try to experiment it a little bit and see how it's going to affect you, make a food journal and note how things affect you when you eat them. See if it affects you poorly or negatively. Actually, one of the things I do want to say before I close out is one of the things that has happened because I now eat some heat processed foods is that I'm not as high energy at the end of the day. So, I will get a bit more tired at the end of the day, which could be a good thing, because some days, back in the day, I would have so much energy, it'd be hard to fall asleep, and I know some of you guys have that. I find that some of the heat processed foods make me a little more tired at night, so then I'll just be like, boom, I'll be out cold. Of course, it depends on what the heat processed food is. Like eggplants generally don't do that to me, artichokes don't do that to me, but the more dense foods, heat processed foods tend to do that to me. And if I'm just eating some cooked heat processed mushrooms in my salads, that's not even a factor. So that could be a benefit. So I want you guys to just look at stuff like that. Try it if you guys want, and if you think I'm crazy, that's all good too. I'm just on my path, on my diet, sharing with what I do in case you guys want to learn and eat a nutrient dense, raw fruit and vegetable dominated diet with maybe some heat processed foods to supplement your diet to make it even better, in my opinion. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. If you guys enjoyed this episode, hey, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Also be sure to share this video with somebody else, other raw food forums, other people that you think it could help. I think a lot of people that are vegan in the planet and the world need to eat a lot more nutrient dense foods, including purple foods and including raw foods. I'm still a raw foodist at heart, although I do see some benefits to eating these foods. And although I'm doing this right now, in the future I may change. I may stop eating these foods. So make sure you click that subscribe button so you stay tuned and get updated when I put out new videos. I'm always changing and adjusting my approach to find out the best ways that I could, lead a healthy fruit and vegetable dominated diet. And I'd like to share that with you guys, and make sure you click the little bell so you get notified as my new videos come out. Finally, be sure to check my past episodes. My past episodes are a wealth of knowledge, over 500 episodes at this time on this YouTube channel, dedicated to teaching you guys how to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, because they are always the best and are going to give you the greatest health benefit, in my personal opinion. So with that, my name is John Kohler with OKRaw.com. We'll see you next time, and until then, remember, keep eating your fresh fruits and vegetables. They're always the best.